Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. And have you ever wondered what the difference between a boy and a man is? Well, Brian Tome, senior pastor of Crossroads, the fastest growing church in America, Outreach Magazine 2017, is actively engaged in combating poverty, building homes for girls rescued from sex slavery, bringing together entrepreneurs to start the first faith-based business accelerator. An avid motorcyclist, he rides tens of thousands of miles and camps more than 30 nights every year. There are 5 marks of a man. They are a primal code that every great man in history has aggressively pursued. Drawing from his own experience and the lives of others, Pastor Brian Tome calls on men to examine themselves and take step in the direction of the adventure of fully realized manhood that honors God, respects women, elevates others, and works purposely for an end greater than their own satisfaction and pleasure. Here to talk to us about his new release, The 5 Marks of a Man, Finding Your Path to Courageous Manhood, is Pastor Brian Tome. Brian, welcome to the program.
Rabbi, it is an honor. Thank you for having me.
Well, God bless you, my friend. This is quite a journey you've been on. You know, the Jewish definition of camping is a hotel without room service.
Well, you also did have the tabernacle.
We did.
That was traveling around. That was a bit of camping.
It was.
Abraham pulling up his tent stakes and moving on. So we got some stuff in common.
We do. And, take me on a journey back. You know, Brian Tome is now, leading this incredibly fast-growing church that has a man-God vision. I mean, in complete, perfect lockstep with the Lord himself in building homes for girls rescued from sex slavery. I mean, there's actually ministries because the church has failed in that area. Some churches have done an all right job, but it's pretty scary going to the truck stops, dealing with human sex trafficking, but yet you've incorporated that. You've brought together entrepreneurs to start the first faith-based business accelerator, meaning you're working towards empowering a relevancy for young people, old people, doesn't matter, who have an entrepreneurial spirit but want to support the what we are, which is a biblical truth initiative that was launched out of our teaching ministry. And here we have all this technology, and we were our own incubator for our own, so I completely understand that as I spent 35 years in corporate America. But you haven't always been the Brian Tome that really has grasped the 5 marks of a man. You were at one time a young boy, and you were being shaped, formed, molded by a number of influences in your life, by a number of people in your life. You actually honor them in the book, but take us back to those early years and the formative years that kind of produced who you are today.
Well, I was born at a very young age, as most of us are. I was actually adopted into a family. My dad, Dick Tome, great man, very, very thankful for him. I was adopted at birth. But my dad and I were very, very different. He is a nuclear engineer. He was top of his class in school, in grad school, just crazy, wicked smart guy. I'm not that smart. I didn't do all that well in schools. Things I liked, he didn't like. Things he liked, I didn't like. And this caused me to feel as a young male like I didn't fit, like I was a weirdo. And I decided to do what all young males do. I needed to prove that I was a man. I think this is part of the reason why so many males in our culture are out of control, just out of control abusing alcohol, out of control abusing women, out of control just buying very, very expensive man toys when they can't even afford it. It's because we're trying to prove to ourselves and others that we're a man. And I fell into that trap in through high school, just did all the classic stupid things that many young males do to try to prove to themselves and everybody else that they're a man. I came to know Christ as a junior in high school, and then things started to change for me. And if you look right now, Rabbi, with where I am now and where I was then, there's no question, aside from God's grace, what his grace did is it brought men into my life that impacted and molded my life. Men. And I started to realize as I then had a new child, a new baby, what do I got to do to have my son Jacob to become the man that I want him to be and not go through the problems that I did? I got to help him go through a manhood exercise, i.e., a bar mitzvah. I've got to do something that tells him he's a man, and I've got to let him know what is a man. And so I just cycled through my mind all the men who had made me who I am. What was it they all had in common? And every single one had 5 things in common, and these 5 things are throughout the entire scriptures. And so out of that journey came a book.
The men that shape your lives, what did they do? Did they mentor you? Did they keep you accountable? Did they create the guardrails to keep you in your own lane? It's tough enough as we drive down the highway as an early driver, knowing what direction. I'm actually, if you ask me if I'm going north, that means I'm going towards Canada. If you ask me if I'm going south, that means I'm going towards Florida. If you ask me if I'm going east, then I'm going towards Israel. If you ask me if I'm going west, I'm going to California. Those are the only really directions I have. So I don't know whether or not my building's facing east. I don't know if it's facing west. I just know whether or not I'm going in the direction the Lord has called me to go. And through my journey with him, he continued to narrow the lane, narrow the lane, narrow the lane, narrow the lane, till now I was only on a path. I wasn't actually even in a vehicle. I'm now in a path, walking with him on this narrow path. How did you get on that path?
It was men who were an example to me. They spent time with me. I was around them. I saw how they lived their life. If you take the Canada metaphor of knowing where Canada is, today you could say, well, I looked up at the GPS. Or you could do the old way, which would be a guy I know who went to Canada headed that direction. So that's where I'm going to go. So I just started seeing people who I admired, who had faith, who had conviction, who were tough, who were strong, not just strong physically, but just strong mentally, strong emotionally. And they started affecting the way I thought about things and lived my life. Some of those guys would have structured times with me for every week. Denny Patton would have structured time with me every week having coffee, building in to be spiritually. Some of those people I didn't really spend a lot of personal time with, i.e. a Reed Carpenter figure as another guy, but I saw what he did. He was impacting me. So I'm hoping that the book does that. I'm not going to be able to personally disciple anybody who buys the book unless I'm already personally discipling you, but I'm hoping that the stories in there and my learnings can be something you can look at from afar that will be a model for you. Say, oh, I want that kind of life. Too few men, Rabbi, too few men have too low of expectations of how great their life can be. We've just kind of drunk the Kool-Aid of, I just need to survive this day, this week. I need to get the next paycheck. I need to pay off my next credit card bill and just stay out of trouble. And that is not a life that works. You as a man, you and I as men, it's a blessing to be a man. I hope women feel that as well too. Women need to feel like it is a blessing to be a woman. I think, I've never been one, but I know as a man, it's a blessing to be a man, and we've got to grab the blessing that God has given us, squeeze everything out of it we can get to get as much of this life. And being a man versus being a boy is a huge watershed moment for us.
You know, in Hebrew, of course, Adam means man. Adam becomes the archetype for men as supposedly being the covering, the head, and here he drops the ball. We don't read of any dialogue that God ever had directly with Eve until he spoke to them together. So he passed instructions to Adam that Adam was responsible to impart in a way that clearly conveyed to Eve that she was to have nothing to do with this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And his accountability for not doing that and creating an environment in which she wouldn't even go down the path that led to that that tree, that she wouldn't even put herself in a position where she would be in a proximity to that tree, let alone eat from that tree. He was held responsible for not creating an environment of safety, and that is why our authority was usurped. Where do we get those lessons today? Who is it we should be turning to today? Where does that knowledge, wisdom, that headship, and what model are we given, and where do we find it? I know we find it in the pages of your book, but when we look in the Bible, what Bible characters are we looking at that are going to give us a concept of what a man is supposed to do?
Well, it's a great thing going back to Adam and Eve, Rabbi. One of the interesting things about that story, as you just mentioned, is they hadn't eaten of the tree yet, and he already had dropped the ball on something. So sometimes this isn't like heinous sin things. This is just things that we have neglected to do. It's interesting that he dropped the ball before sin actually entered the world for him. There's huge cosmic stakes in this for us. Adam is certainly one person that we can learn from, maybe learn how not to do it, but there's amazing models all through the Bible of this stuff. You go on to, Moses. Moses had a lot of issues, right? He didn't want to lead. He didn't want to do that. I would say at that moment he was a boy. He was a boy because he was working for that day. One of the marks of a man is a man has a vision where a boy just lives day to day. Moses had a boyish sense of, who will I tell them has sent me? I don't know that I can do this. He really didn't want a big vision challenge. Finally, God gripped his heart and he said, okay, I'll do it. That's a man moment. He takes on a vision. And we see this all throughout the Bible. Nehemiah, right? He has the vision for this wall. He takes it, he grabs it. In fact, every Bible hero, this is just one of the 5 marks, every single one is a hero because they have a vision, where normal males today are boys. We have nothing we're working for. Think about Abraham, right? Genesis 12:2, you just rattled through my little bio of things that God's done through Crossroads. That's because in Genesis 12:2, it says, God says to Abraham, which I believe he would say is to all men of God, through you all people will be blessed. As men, we should have a vision. The world should be different because of us. Things will change. And that's why when I have an opportunity to start something or to be a blessing to somebody, I want to do that. And we see that in every single person all throughout the Bible. There are heroes because they had a vision, they were a man.
That's very interesting. You go to Genesis really 1 through 3, where God establishes that we are to be blessed and to be a blessing. That this is a mandate that he gives us, and that we are to change the nations by being blessed and then being a blessing. So it's that going to James, faith without works. In the Hebrew, it's called Shema, to hear, but it's an active hearing that's followed up by an action. Hearing without any action to it is passive. There is no passivity in the Word of God that says hear. When he says hear or incline your ear or listen, it is active, it is not passive. There's an action that must follow, and you must apply what you've heard. Faith. Okay? Faith comes by hearing. So you hear, the action of hearing is faith. It's a very important connection that's made all the way through the Bible. This is why we see that in the book of Revelation, I've seen your great works, but this I hold against you. Look at the heights from which you've fallen, you've forsaken your first love. So now you're steeped in works, but you've abandoned faith. This hearing from God, this boy does those kind of things.
Yeah, if you talk about those 5 marks, Rabbi, if there was to be one thing, the thread that goes through all of them, you just said it. If there's one thread, it's defined as this: men are aggressive, boys are passive. Now, I don't mean aggressive as far as damaging somebody that kind of way. I mean aggressive in the greatest mindset of the word, like going and taking control of things. You just said one, doing. Don't be hearers of the word, be doing of the word. Boys are passive. And I think this is part of what is happening in our culture. We're just trying to get everyone to be passive. Just be nice. Just don't hurt anybody. Just love everybody. Just be happy. Just tolerate everybody. Okay, I like us being happy. We should tolerate people who are different than us. We shouldn't hurt somebody. Okay, I'm with that. But the problem is those messages all the time numb us out to saying you have one life from God. You need to honor him with that life, and you need to make aggressive moves. This is why young males today are just not getting married. It's an aggressive move. It's an aggressive move to get married. Much more passive move to live with somebody. Much more passive move to just date them forever and ever. Young males don't have the confidence to make an aggressive move for marriage. That's the backbone of so many great males.
Have we done this, Brian, kind of out of order? Are we raising boys to be men, or are we raising children to grow up? Are we missing the mark that if we're going to raise up a generation of mothers, fathers, husbands, and wives, which was the blessing and command of God, be fruitful and multiply, each after its own kind? This was a blessing to the animals. It was a blessing to man. It was repeated in the story of Noah, where they were commanded to repopulate the earth, to replenish the earth. Both man and beast were to replenish the earth. The institution of marriage was created by God between one man and one woman. There are fundamentalists that believe in polygamy. There are cultures that believe in polygamy, but God was very clear in his word, one man, one woman. But as they're raising children, the culture of the day is that, you're going to continue to proliferate or propagate the earth until you have a son, until you have a namesake, until you have someone to carry on the seed line of your family. Of course, we see this as being a mandate in Genesis 3:15, as the mandate of the seed of the woman. So God's always going to protect the seed line to bring Jesus about, the seed line of the Jews to keep us here, right, to survive. This is the reason why we survived for 5,000 years, is because we're the seed line. We're the ones that call for the return of Jesus. Matthew 23:37 through 39 makes that clear. He's not coming back until Jerusalem cries for his return. And so he's talking about the Jews. There's no such thing as a Christian at the time in which he's speaking. But are we missing the mark? Jesus was raised, right, as a young child. He was a boy, but reached manhood when he could sit at 12 years old in the company of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the teachers of the law. And he spoke as one who had knowledge, and he could keep up with them. I went through the same thing as I sat under rabbis for the first 44 years of my life before I came to faith in Jesus. I sat under rabbis, and I had to be able to hold my own, and I had to be able to defend my position from both the Talmud and the Torah. I had to be able to do that and was challenged to do so. And then I stood before a large crowd and led them and conducted the entire service as my rite of passage into manhood. And my parents prayed a prayer over me. And that prayer stated that they were no longer responsible to God for me. They were releasing me in the hands of God, and now I was accountable to God for my own behavior. That they had been my covering, all right, until I was now acknowledged as a man in the sight of God, and now that covering was being removed, and the consequences of God would now fall upon my own head and not upon their heads. They were basically absolving themselves from the spiritual responsibility. They still had the physical responsibility. We kind of look at that as the vertical and the horizontal on the cross. All right, this
Yeah.
vertical relationship became my responsibility. A part of the horizontal relationship became their responsibility until a certain age of the time I went off to college. And then it was, from that point, you're going to go to college, you're going to get out of college, you're going to go do and be whatever it is you're going to do and be, and go and, as God said to Abraham, go to the place that I will show you. Just go.
Well, there's so many great jumping off points and so much great truth there. Let's go to Jesus, right? Hebrews says that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature. When did Jesus become a man? I don't know. Was it 12? Was it 8? I'm not sure when it is. We have this weird thing in America in our modern times. We've invented something that has never existed in any culture in world history. We've invented this thing called adolescence, where we tell our children, our young males, we expect you to be an idiot. And it's okay for you to be an idiot, because I was an idiot too. My goodness. I mean, people used to own businesses when they were 14 years old. They'd be plowing fields when they were 6 years old. They'd be marrying when they were 12 years old. They were growing up, but there wasn't this, we expect you're going to be this way. My gosh, adolescence anymore seems to last till 30 for a lot of us. We're just perpetual boys. What we do know about Jesus, though, is he had at least two declarative moments. It could have been more that I believe were significant for him. One was at his baptism, where God says, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." And then God repeats it again at the transfiguration when he's there with Peter, James, and John, where Peter, James, and John hear God say, "This is my son with whom I'm well pleased." I don't know what God said to Jesus before that, but this I know. That did something to Jesus' heart as a man that we as men need to have. We need men to look at us and go, "Hey, you've done good. I appreciate you. I'm pleased with you. You're a man." My dad never did that for me. My dad still hasn't done that for me. And I tell every guy I can who's got a kid, you hold the power over that child, because you get to tell him who he is, and make sure you tell him he's a man, and you'll get man behavior versus boy behavior.
We're talking to Brian Tome, author of The 5 Marks of a Man, Finding Your Path to Courageous Manhood. You know, this age of accountability that we've also created, adolescence, which we've also created, we've created these false ideals that allow people to live down to our expectation. But what if you were able to have a definition of the difference between a boy and a man, and you began to set expectations, and you began to coach and mentor your own child or people in your community, your neighborhood, or people in your church, and you had the tools to do that, and you could recognize what those behaviors were and begin to address them through biblical truth and affect change, and all of a sudden you see vision, responsibility, team player, someone that's a leader, somebody that knows the value of work, somebody that has the courage to take the minority position in a matter which is the right position, because if God is for you, who can be against you? And to understand the power and the authority that comes from taking God's stand, not man's stand. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to find out more about Boys to Men, not the group, not the song.
Right? It is a catchy song.
It is, but the man, Brian Tome, the author of 5 Marks of a Man, Finding Your Path to Courageous Manhood. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking to Pastor Brian Tome, author of the newly released book, The 5 Marks of a Man, Finding Your Path to Courageous Manhood. Brian, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So if we focus on this, should we focus on what it is to be a man, or should we first come to an understanding of what a boy looks like?
I think they're inextricably linked. I think it's the flip side of both issues. I think you can look at either one. You come to the same place.
All right. So what would we then define as a boy?
Okay. Well, there's 5. There's 5 marks, and again, these 5 marks are in and through every man that all of us respect and want to be a part of. These 5 marks are in and through every hero in Scripture. And in fact, when this mark isn't met, it's always the downfall of one of the heroes in Scripture. It's always a blip on the radar. And I would encourage anybody, just do your own mental, your own mental look through of the people in your life. So it was 5 of them. That's, you want me to tell you what they are?
Well, I want to go point by point because I want
All
us
right.
to make sure that we are expositorily exploring each one of these.
Great. Well, one of them, and they don't necessarily go in a order, but one of them we've touched on already is that a man has a vision for his life. A boy lives day to day. That's a big one. Men have some reason why they're getting out of bed in the morning. Men have some reason why they will sacrifice today because they want something better tomorrow. A boy will just never see that. A boy will cheat in class because he doesn't see the value of learning. A boy will undervalue education because it makes for his hard day studying for a class. A boy will just take a menial job and have no aspiration for another job. A boy will just perpetually date and never get married because it doesn't have a vision for having multiple generations come out of him. A boy will just mindlessly stay in the same job instead of starting a new business. A boy will get divorced multiple times because he doesn't have a vision to stay with the same wife. There's all different kind of visions where a man he'll say, I'm gonna do something. I'll be the first person in my family to be married my whole life. That's a vision. You're not talking about having a vision to start Apple. Maybe you do, that's fine. But we're just recognizing I'm going to do difficult things today to get something better tomorrow because that's what God wants from me, and that's what a man does. That's the first mark.
All right. As you're talking, I'm looking at King David. I'm looking at a man who exhibited some boyish behavior.
Yes, he did.
And I think that what the point you're making is we have a clear definition of the 5 attributes or points that define a boy and the 5 attributes that define and point the 5 marks of a man. But in reality, our audience are men and women, adults, and so as we look at examine our own lives, are we men with boyish behavior? Is this a way for us to examine and say that I am a man, but you know, I like to play, but I'm not a team player. You know, if I look at the life of King David, he was a man that exhibited all of these boyish behaviors, and we see the consequences that went with every time as a man he exhibited the boyish behaviors, and every time as a man he exhibited the manly behaviors. He was rewarded greatly. And so is your approach to this that, okay, I can understand the difference between a boy and a man, but I'm a man and I'm reading this book. Am I going to look at this and say, and ask myself those questions? Am I a man exhibiting boyish behavior?
We all, the great insight, Rabbi, we all have boyish tendencies. Every man can fall into boyhood at any moment. David's a classic example. Another one of the marks is a man is a protector, a boy is a predator. David comes onto the scene because he's protecting the honor of the nation of Israel. He comes on and goes, Goliath is taunting our nation and our God. Why is no one taking him on? And then, of course, he takes him on and he wins. And then his beginning of his downfall, as we know, is Bathsheba. He's a predator. It says, at the time when kings go out to war, David stayed at home. So he no longer had a vision for war, which what God called him to. He no longer had a vision to beat all the marauders who would come onto the nation of Israel's land during the wintertime. The king was supposed to go out then and beat them off the ground once their chariot wheels could roll. At a time when kings do that, especially a man who is a warrior like David, he stays home and he has wandering eyes. And he preys on his friend's wife, Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. And of course, then his life just completely breaks down. We see some good moments in his life of manhood after that, but he's wrestling with boyhood and the consequence of his boyish ways pretty much for the rest of his life. So at any moment, a great person like yourself or myself, we're not on our game. we'll be drawn to the magnetic pull of boyhood.
You know, I think about one of your points about boyhood is you want to be the MVP, and that a man is a team player. But even more than that, the MVP wants applause, he wants accolades, he wants recognition. Now, here you are, senior pastor of one of the fastest growing churches in America. In Judaism, we usually end our service with the Aaronic blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord make his face turn his countenance toward you and give you his peace. In the name of the Prince of Peace, Jesus our Messiah. Amen. You are dismissed. So we don't even have a setup where even if I preach the most powerful message that could be just life-changing, the invitation, people come down, there might be applause, the people are clapping because the angels are rejoicing in heaven, but it never at any point in my preaching career would I want applause because I wanted my Father to tell me well done. And it's kind of been a tradition set up where there's no accolades, there's no applause for the message because we're not the message, we're the messenger. And so the MVP, he loves that spotlight, he loves that limelight, he loves that applause, but the team player wants the whole water to rise and the boat to rise, all the boats to rise at the same time. Where do we see that play out, and how do we develop that? You know, it's one thing to, and I want to compliment you, because it's one thing that authors do that says, okay, I've been complaining about this problem, so I wrote a book about the problem, okay? And I've clearly identified the problem. And in these pages, I've made it clear that we have a problem, okay? But there's got to be a solution.
Yeah.
And if we don't bring the solution, then we're failing to equip the saints. So
yeah, this is one of the reasons why this whole exercise of promoting my book is very foreign to me. I've written books before, and they generally don't sell well. I don't think it's because the books were awful, though maybe they were. The publishers always tell me I'm not doing enough to promote the book. I'm not leveraging all my relationships. I'm not this and that. I'm not. And I've come to the conclusion I need to do that more often, which is why I'm on your program. Very thankful to have you on my program. But my heart has been, I want to be a team player. As a pastor, I can be a team player in the midst of staff and in the midst of a church going places. I love the fact that in Cincinnati, where I am, everyone's heard of Crossroads. It's the largest church in the city. But people haven't heard of me. I love the fact that you go to our website and my name isn't anywhere on the website because it's not about me. I want to be a team player. When it comes to the book industry, however, and getting your message out, you've got to do a little bit of self-promotion. So I'm trying to figure out how I can self-promote or promote the book without being a boy of an MVP, without saying, yeah, well, Crossroads is who it is because of me. Well, I'm obviously the best author on manhood there ever it is. Look at me. I'm actually the best looking man you've ever seen. Obviously, I'm not. But, you know, there's people who don't say those things. But we think that they think those things because of how they carry themselves off. So I just want to be really careful that I don't become a boy, just be puffing myself up. And I think all of us, whatever circle of influence we're in, we got to look at this. And by the way, if you're a woman, we've had a lot of women go through this material, and you learn, oh no, my boyfriend is a boy. Oh my gosh, maybe he's not the right one. Or as a wife, we can realize, oh, my husband is a boy. It doesn't mean I belittle him, but at least I recognize, okay, this is a growth area for him, because all of us wrestle with these things from time to time.
Well, I'm going to take you down a little rabbi trail, okay? First of all, you're in Cincinnati. Are you a Skyline chili fan?
Yes.
Okay, then we can continue the conversation. If you had gone in any other direction, I would have gone to commercial break and told you we had technical difficulty.
Even though we have owners of Gold Star Chili in Cincinnati who go to Crossroads, they will probably leave the church now that I said that. But yes, I like Skyline more than Gold Star.
Okay, and so do I. I was actually the Wrangler jean salesman out of Columbus that handled Western Ohio, so back in the early 70s. So I know the area well. Uh, Promoting God and God's message is exactly what you and I are called to do. I don't want to be the #1 Christian television program in the world. I want to be the one that right now 120 home churches in Pakistan of groups of 20 are gathered around one person's phone or one person's computer, and they're watching this program in the underground churches in Pakistan and are writing to us and calling me Papa, and they're hearing biblical truth because they can't hear a pastor preach a message. So every one of these interviews is a sermon to them. It's a new enlightenment to them, and they can't get the book, but they can get the message, which is what we're all about, is biblical truth. So, so if we were called to take the gospel to the four corners of the earth, and you can do that through your book, then you're fulfilling the mandate and the mission that you were given. And it's not self-promotion, it's God promotion. And if you don't look at it as a divine appointment, a divine assignment, and do everything you can, every technique you use to build the church is the same technique you're going to build. You tell people to bring a friend next week to church. You tell them that if you pull out of your driveway and you see two cars in the driveway on either side of you, stop your car, get out, knock on their door and say, why are you home? If you don't have a church, come with me. All right? It's the same thing with the book. All right? How many of you in the audience have a mother? Well, that's 100% of our audience. How many of you in our audience had a father? Whether present or absent, you still were fathered. 100% of our audience. Then this book is for you. Because if you are looking at yourself, if your spouse is looking at you, your mother's looking at you, your father's looking at you, your potential spouse is looking for you, your potential wife is looking for a man and she needs to know what she should be looking for, this is for you. If you're a man and you want to do a self-assessment, this is for you. If you want to find out if you're a man with boyish behaviors and that's what's bringing you trouble in your life, then this book is for you. Why? Not because Brian Tome wrote it, because God wrote it, because it's filled with Scripture and it's filled with an understanding of God's message. All right? Brian's just the messenger. Much easier to promote God as you do in the pulpit and continue that and branch out with a book than it is to think about the fact that I'm self-promoting. And yes, you need hundreds of thousands of followers to want to grab a hold of the message of Crossroad Church and the message of the 5 marks of a man and the message contained in your other books. And you can't be apologetic about it. I know you in the pulpit that you're not apologetic about the Word of God. You've never apologized for quoting biblical truth. You're probably like me that says if I just stepped on your toe, then the best response will be for you to move your feet because I am not changing the message. And so if you've been given this message from God to deliver, then He will open the doors for you, and it's your job to show up and walk through and take that stand. So as we investigate this, and this becomes, are you yourself, Brian, is this boyish behavior or is this manly behavior? Because the vision, when you wrote this book, all right, you had a vision for this book, all right? But now are you just living day to day hoping the book sells? Well, I would say then that would be a boyish attitude, thinking, and that would be the Brian Tome. Well, because if I build it, they will come. If Brian Tome writes it, well, then they'll buy it. You know, that's great for Dr. Gary Chapman with 50 million books in print on the 5 love languages, okay? That if he wrote it, all right, and there's a new book out, then Gary's going to get people to buy the book. It's going to be on display at the airport. It's going to be on display at every church. It's going to be in every church bookstore. All right, so you reach that point. Stephen King writes a book, okay? Well, because Stephen King wrote the book, okay? It could be the most ungodly, unholy, satanically steeped in horror, but yet you have members in your congregation that are absolutely in love with Stephen King. All right? Can a believer be in love with horror? Well, unfortunately, yes. So,
Yeah.
from that
That's a good
perspective,
word.
from that perspective, I want you to look at you're being a team player when you're building the kingdom. And this is one brick in the wall of the kingdom of God that you're laying as a foundation stone that says that if men are exhibiting boyish behavior, the message is step up. All right, and here's a path to do it, and here are tools to do it for you to step up. Moms and dads, if you're raising children, here's a way for you to take an approach just a little bit different for empowering, encouraging. And isn't that what the word says? Let no unwholesome talk come from your mouth, but only that which is for the encouragement and for the uplifting of another. Aren't mothers and fathers supposed to do that? Fathers, don't exasperate your children. Husbands, love your wives as Jesus loved the church. Wives, respect. Well, I don't respect him because he acts like a boy. All right. Well, how do you help speak manhood into him? Where do we get the vocabulary of coaching, mentoring? All right. If I want to mentor somebody, this might be a book that I'm going to have in my hand. All right, that I'm going to use as my mentoring as I'm taking a young boy and I'm moving him into manhood by what? Becoming a vision crafter. All right, that's part of my vision for mentoring. I would think that any mentoring group would want to have a resource like this, and so you begin to target and focus, and these are the points in the book. So
Very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you. That's good. That's good counsel.
When we take a look at even ministry, you say a boy, one of the 5 attributes of a boy is he wants the reassurance of the crowd. All right.
Yes, a man takes a minority position. A boy wants to be in the majority. Wants the crowd to approve of him. Yes.
So what does that look like?
Well, it looks like when everybody else is saying this is what acceptable morality is, even though it goes against God's standards, it goes against the history of the Bible, it goes against just common sense. A man says, no, that's not going to be right. No, that's not right. He stands against that. It means when everybody else in the office says we're going to fudge the numbers for the quarterly report so it looks good, and everyone says, yeah, the man takes the minority position and says, guys, we're not going to do that. We can't do that. It means that your understanding of sexuality is going to be different because the majority of our culture has a very twisted, permissive view of sex. Instead of sex being a beautiful thing that shows that we are one, and when we physically come together in sex, it's to mirror that we are spiritually one before God because we're married or one. And when it happens outside of that context, it's violating the covenantal design of God. And so a man's going to take a minority position and say, no, I have a different view of sexuality. There you go, on and on and on and on. The pressure of this world to conform all of us, to have the world's values, the world's beliefs, the world's morality, the world's goals, which don't work. It's why in America, our suicide rate is skyrocketing. Our life rate, our life expectancy rate is dropping. We're not even rate in the top 10 countries in the world as far as happiness rate is concerned. And I think it's because we've gone away from God's ways of living and they don't work. And so for us to have a life of meaning, we're going to have to take a minority position. That's called preaching right there, yeah, Rabbi.
Can boys I guess the question I want to ask is it too late to take a 45-year-old boy and turn him into a man?
No, it's not too late. It's just a little more difficult because it's like asking, can a 45-year-old who's dependent on alcohol for, an escape plan, can a 45-year-old get rid of alcohol? Yes, he can, but it's going to be a lot harder than, it was for me when I was 16. to stop abusing alcohol. It just wasn't in my system that long. So yes, a 45-year-old can definitely become a man, but boy, you're going to be going against decades of ingrained behavior. You can get there. You're going to need some men around you because men are team players. That's another thing. Men are team players. You got to be around other people who want that journey. It's going to be hard, but absolutely you can do it.
So this is a book filled with hope.
It is hope. And look, I could sound like I've got all my stuff together today. I can sound like, my poop smells good. It doesn't. I can sound like everything's good. I wrestle with boyishness every day. Someone says something to me on staff who works for me, and I can get way more offended than I should get offended because, I don't, as a boy, I react much more positively to encouragement than to criticism. If I really want to be about the vision, if I want to be about the team, I should welcome criticism. I should welcome feedback because it tells me how to be better servant of the team. But as a boyish ways, I get way too offended way too easily. I mean, that's one of my issues. I got a lot of issues. If you're looking for the world's ultimate standard of 24-hour-a-day manhood, I'm not your guy. Jesus is your guy. I'm not your guy on that.
Well, we get a lot of lessons. So to sum this up, a boy lives day to day, wants to be the MVP. A boy plays, he wants the reassurance of the crowd, and a boy is a predator. But a man has a vision for his life. He's a team player. He works. He has the courage to take a minority position, and he is a protector. And all of those tools as to how to migrate from boyhood to manhood are contained in these pages. And once we identify what these attributes are, whether or not they're the attributes of a man with boyish behavior or a boy who's being trained up in the way he should go, and when he grows older, he will not depart from it, then this is also a guidebook for the young, for the old, for people to examine themselves. It really has a universal appeal to both men and women alike, and especially to those that have a call to mentor, to help young people become better than what they are and to see a future for themselves. Pastor Brian Tome, author of The 5 Marks of a Man, Finding Your Path to Courageous Manhood. Not only is it to identify the problem and the challenges that go with the problem, but it's also rich with solutions, actions that can be taken, scripture-filled, biblically sound, biblically grounded wisdom contained in these pages. Pastor Brian Tome, thank you for joining us here on Revealing the Truth.
Rabbi, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for giving me a forum and amazing coaching and counsel. I mean that. I sat at your feet there with that good word you had for me personally. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Well, praise God. Anything we can do to help you, drop me a line. Happy to help you in any way I can. God bless you, my friend.
You too, brother.
We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.